Hello everybody, I am Adam, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing something very different, and I'm going to explain why to you guys. I'm going to be making a reaction video, as you can tell by the title. I was going to release a new Freakishly Bizarre in place of this, and I got very close to finishing that video, but ultimately I decided that I needed to scrap it, and it wasn't really a decision that I wanted to make, but I felt like it was very necessary. I'm just gonna tell you, it was about Pro Jared, and I felt like at the time of writing it and editing it, it was a good video for what it was, but I used some examples in there comparing the two dramas, and over time those dramas came to light as either being not true or only partially true, and in another case it just felt very insensitive to compare it to it, and I just felt like overall it wasn't something that I wanted to release, and it wasn't something that I felt was appropriate, and I also felt like it wasn't exactly up to standard with some of the other things that I've made in the past, so I decided that it was the best decision to scrap it. I'm sorry if you were expecting a Freakishly Bizarre. I know that's why a lot of people are subscribed to my channel, but I need to take a break from it. And you know, like I said at the beginning of the year, I was like, oh, I'm going to put out a video every month, and shortly after making that community post, my Dan Schneider video got taken down, and that really demotivated me very hard, and it was just very difficult to sit down and want to make a video until not too long ago. And then that video that I was making was just weighing down on me kinda hard, and that kinda demotivated me a little bit too, so I figured I need to take a step back from making Freakishly Bizarre for just a little bit, because they are a lot to make, and also getting rid of that Pro Jared video altogether has drained me a lot. So I'm going to make a little bit of different videos for a little while. I'm not gonna stop Freakishly Bizarre by any means, but I am gonna take a little bit of a break from that because it has been killing me. So we're gonna make something a little bit different, and it's gonna be a reactionary video, kind of like in the vein of my video where I reacted to the article about the guy being a proud pedophile. Sort of like that, but I'm actually gonna put some effort into it. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoy this video, and I'll talk to you in a minute. Alright, so what is the article that we're going to be reacting to today? Well, it's kind of an article. I mean, it is an article, but it's also something that has kind of been in the news a little bit recently. If you've been on Twitter or Instagram, I don't even know, it might be on Facebook, you'll have seen videos of people going to grocery stores and taking ice cream out of the freezers and sticking their hands in it and eating it, or just licking it in general. And then there's this whole offshoot of videos where people go into grocery stores and they just fuck with shit. First of all, don't do that. That's really shitty. And also, B, I mean, if you do that, you're committing a felony. And in this video, we're gonna kind of go into that and why that's the case, but we're going to be reacting to an article from the New York Times that I found. It's from July 6th, and it's called Bluebell Ice Cream Liquor in Viral Video is Found. So the woman that started it, she went into I want to say it was a Walmart. It was a Walmart, and she grabbed some ice cream out of the freezer, like I said, and just took a big old lick out of it, which, like I said, is fucked up. You shouldn't do that, but they found her, so just a little bit of backstory for you. So I'm not gonna read the whole thing like I did with the last one, but we're gonna be going into it. So here we go. In a freezer at the police department in Lufkin, Texas, there is a half-gallon container of Bluebell ice cream in an evidence bag, Exhibit A from a cringe-inducing video that drew widespread attention. In the video, a teenage girl can be seen removing the tub of ice cream from a store freezer, lifting the lid, licking the top of the ice cream, then closing the lid and putting the container back before walking away. Soon after the video was posted to Instagram on June 28th, social media erupted in shock and disgust, as they should. Some posted copycat videos on Twitter, and others implored Bluebell to use tamper-resistant foils under the lids of its ice cream tubs. First of all, I'm kind of shocked that Bluebell didn't already do that. I feel like a lot of ice creams that I've seen, at least Ben & Jerry's, they put like a plastic wrap around the lid, which I'm assuming it's to show you that it hasn't been open and it hasn't been fucked with. Anyway. The company, which has its headquarters in Brenham, Texas, said in the statement that based on security footage, the location, and the inspection of the carton, we believe we may have recovered the half-gallon that was tampered with. Out of an abundance of caution, the company said it removed that tub and all ice creams of the same flavor, tin roof, from the store. On Friday, the police in Lufkin found the girl, who was 17. They did not publicly identify her. Because of her age, charges, if any, would be handled by the juvenile justice system, a police department spokeswoman, Jessica Pebsworth, said. First of all, and I'm gonna say first of all a lot in this video, even though she's 17, I feel like they should probably try her as an adult, because it is a felony, and it is a pretty serious felony. Tampering with products is dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. And we'll get into why in this particular case, it is so dangerous. I feel like they need to try her as an adult, and maybe not give her like the full 20 years, I think it is. But, I mean, she deserves to be punished to the fullest extent, in my humble opinion. On top of there being 6 women with similar names and appearances, we had a screen name within one letter of the suspect, the spokeswoman said. That screen name turned out to be a catfish, or someone pretending to be the woman who licked the ice cream at Walmart. The person behind the fake account claimed to have been sick earlier in the week and said that the ice cream should now be called, quote, Flubell. The person encouraged others to post videos of themselves licking unopened ice cream tubs to start an epidemic. This is why it's so dangerous. You can't put others at risk in this way, because if you do have the flu, which people do die from the flu, you are going to start an epidemic. I don't know what else to say about that. Do not, and I'm gonna repeat this a lot, do not do this. If you are so fucking brain dead, and I'm sorry if you are brain dead, just find a different hobby. Don't go out into public stores, which all stores are public, don't go out into stores and just tamper with things that people buy on a extremely regular basis. Don't tamper with shit, period. I feel like people shouldn't have to say this, especially if you're either an adult or basically an adult. Don't. Please, for the love of God, do not do this. Dr. Bruce E. Hirsch, an infectious diseases specialist at Northwell Health in Manhasset, New York, said on Saturday that the ice cream licking put others at risk, as I said a minute ago. There are many viruses that can be passed on through saliva, such as mononucleosis, he said. The risk may have been partially diminished because of the ice cream's low temperature and high sugar content, he said. Freezing could cause the water and bacteria to freeze and expand, destroying the bacteria, and sugar could leach the water out of the bacteria, he said. In a statement on Saturday, Bluebell said this, quote, "Food safety is our top priority, and we work hard to provide a safe product and maintain the highest level of confidence from our consumers, not customers. This case is now in the hands of the Texas Juvenile Justice Department to pursue however it deems appropriate," he continued. In 2015, Bluebell Creameries recalled its ice cream over concerns of contamination by the potentially deadly bacteria Listeria. So, as you can see, this is a serious case of food tampering, and I'm very glad that they caught her, but you may not know, like I didn't know until a few days ago, that there was an extremely deadly case of tampering with products back in the early 80s. And I actually found this whole case through Twitter, believe it or not. I'm on Twitter all the time, and I don't know how I didn't hear of this, because it's kind of terrifying to see, especially since it's such a highly used product. And I'm gonna go into it. I found another article by Vice that I'm going to read for you. Not all of it, like I said. So this one is called Murder by Tylenol. And this goes into the Tylenol murders of the early 80s, where a person, which they never caught, laced Tylenol with, I believe it was cyanide. It says it in this article. Potassium cyanide, sorry. And I believe 8 people died, which, I mean, 1 person is a lot of people to die. So this case really brought upon this whole movement, I guess you could call it, where companies started sealing their products more effectively, and they were sealing them with like the foil, like they said in the last article, over the ice cream that they should have in place, whatever. A lot of companies started doing that so you could tell if the product had been opened, and then you could, get rid of it. So the subtitle of this reads, "The creepiest American act of terror you've never heard of." I had never heard of it. Anyway, Mary K had a scratchy throat. Adam J had bronchitis. Mary R, fresh off childbirth, had full body aches. Mary M had a raging headache. Stan J and his wife Teresa had suffered the sudden loss of a loved one. Paula P just needed to settle the nerves after a red-eye flight. One by one, these 7 Chicago area residents popped extra-strength Tylenol capsules. It was September 29th, 1982. All were dead within 24 hours. What we know about the Chicago Tylenol murders, as the incidents became known, is we don't know much of anything. First, some facts we do know. The victims ingested potassium cyanide-laced capsules. These were purchased over the counter at 5 stores scattered about Chicago and surrounding suburbs. Mass hysteria and the most intense media furor since Kennedy's assassination ensued. Confounded local, state, and national law enforcement convened a 140-person investigative task force to crack the case, a flashpoint in the narratives of Big Pharma and the Food and Drug Administration. The Federal Anti-Tampering Act of 1983 was a sweeping revision to how we go about food, packaging, and drugs. This saw marked shifts away from the capsules manipulated with little trace to solid tablets. It only got more batshit. Tips poured in, some anonymous, of lone wolf crazies and international terror crime syndicates alike. Investigators would amass 15,000 pages of documents, test millions of Tylenol capsules, and interview 400 persons of interest out of a pool of 20,000. So this case is so terrifying because Tylenol is such a common drug that people take for like headaches and whatever. I mean, that's what I use it for. It's so terrifying because if you're just buying this because of a headache, you could be dead in no time. And so many people, I feel, buy Tylenol every single day. Imagine how many people buy it every month, every week, every year, and imagine how many of those could be laced. It's just such a terrifying thought that you could be taking extra strength Tylenol or just any medicine like ibuprofen or whatever that could be laced with Tylenol. And what's also really scary, which they go into, I believe, is that they never found the person that did this. And from this, so many different cases like this came up. Just imagine that for a minute. You could be living in a place like, I don't know, some small Texas town or some small Iowa town, and suddenly there's a bunch of deaths because of people buying laced Tylenol or ibuprofen. Just imagine how horrific that would be. And if you were alive during then, which I wasn't, imagine how horrified you must have been back then when this was first happening. Anyway, I digress. 2 key suspects emerged. Roger Arnold, a DIY chemist and dockhand at a Jewel Foods warehouse west of Chicago, was cleared of any blame, but he cracked under the media's gaze, getting 30 years for point-blanking John Stanisha, a guy he mistakenly took for a bar owner. Marty Sinclair, whom Arnold thought had instigated the unwanted attention. Arnold was convicted in 1984 for second-degree murder. He'd be released after serving half his sentence, then die in 2008. I'm assuming when they say point blank that he probably shot him point blank. That's just what I'm gathering from this. Sorry for the voice cracks. The manhunt turned to one James Lewis, an accountant and known extortionist from Kansas City. Lewis had fled to Chicago with his wife Leanne on heat that he'd killed and dismembered an elderly colleague, Raymond West. Under the pseudonyms Robert and Nancy Richardson, the pair locked horns with Frederick McCaughey, the Miller Brewing heir who owned Lakeside Travel, where Nancy kept the books. Robert drifted as a temp for First National Bank of Chicago. Lakeside would implode in a blaze of 18 bounced employee checks. One of these, to the tune of $511.33, was Leanne's. Fuming, the pair blamed McCaughey's shoddy management. They were struck down at an August wage claim hearing, where a presiding officer didn't so much side with McCaughey as ruled that a claim couldn't be filed against non-existent money. They were also sued by the currency exchange where Leanne cashed the check, but only paid a quarter of the eventual fine. On September 4th, 1982, they lit out for the East Coast, this time as William and Karen Wagner. They'd quickly reassume the Richardson handle, hopping from one dilapidated New York City motel to another. Then all hell broke loose in Chicago. The 7 victims, aged 12 to 35, each fell comatose from the tainted pills. In some cases, the cyanide, an almond-scented crystalline, gripped its target before there was even a chance to reach for a phone. It didn't take long either for an extortion note to surface at Johnson & Johnson, Tylenol's manufacturer. If the drug marketer wanted to stop the killing, it had better wire $1 million to a certain Chicago bank account. Handwritten in capitals, the letter gushed over cyanide. The poison operates quickly and takes so very little and had New York postage. It appeared the pseudonymous extortionist was at it again. And just real quick, I will throw up the letter that they have on the article on screen just for a second. If you want to pause it and read it, by all means, feel free. By now, the Richardsons had new monikers. Edward and Carol Scott were holed up on the 200 block of East 17th Street. Investigators were onto them. Lewis Richardson Scott was their man. He'd hoped the extortion note would have framed McCaughey. A timepiece from December 27th reported that when Leanne surrendered to Chicago authorities on December 14th, a day after her husband's arrest, she was held on a $5 million bail when U.S. Attorney Dan Webb alleged that she'd helped her husband, panicked after the botched scam, sent a mid-October death threat to President Reagan. I, for one, kind of find the President Reagan death threat kind of interesting because, I've also never heard of that death threat, and I feel like you would, at least kind of learn about that kind of stuff in school, but maybe not. Maybe he got so many death threats that they just swept it away. Anyway, the 2-month citywide manhunt ended on the 4th floor of the Mid-Manhattan Library at 40th Street and 5th Avenue. FBI and New York PD officials found James and Carol quietly copying names and addresses of newspapers from a reference book. Unarmed, he didn't resist. He was cuffed, hauled to New York's Metropolitan Correctional Center, and held on a $5 million bail. That's where it breaks down. Codenamed TYMURS, as the FBI labeled the case, which I'm assuming means Tylenol murders, went cold almost as quick as the leads and suspects accumulated. Only 100 days into investigations, the 140-person unit was whittled down to 20 detectives, said then Illinois Attorney General Tyrone Fauner in a 1985 New York Times feature. "We lacked a crime scene and we lacked a motive. The two inroads to move into the solution. All that was left was the cyanide." James Lewis was convicted of extortion. He'd serve 13 years of a 20-year sentence and be paroled in 1995, but with not enough evidence to prove that he did more than piggyback on the notoriety of the deaths, Time explained, the case stalled. Theories abound. Maybe the killer or killers replaced the acetaminophen, Tylenol's active ingredient, with cyanide on site, visiting each store, they were 5, and purchasing the pills so as to not blow the plan on a shoplifting charge. The switch could have been made in the parking lot. Empty some capsules, fill with poison, recap, pepper doctor pills at the top of the bottle, return to store shelf, repeat elsewhere. Or maybe it was done at any point on Tylenol's distribution. The atrocity could have been far-reaching if in fact it was a factory or warehouse scheme. Lewis insists it was. Johnson & Johnson, reeling from what could have spun out into full-blown historical shaming, had no choice but to pull its entire stock of Tylenol, some 23 to 30 million bottles, from stores. This sort of recall was unprecedented in American history. Most Chicago market pills were incinerated or flushed down toilets. The company lost $100 million, but was praised for damage control that favored public safety and not corporate earnings. I read somewhere, and I'm not super sure where, I read it a couple days ago, that the way Johnson & Johnson responded to this whole ordeal, this whole nightmare, is one of the greatest ways a company has ever responded to something like this ever. And I can't disagree with that. The way that they went about this is really respectable, and I have to give props to them some 30 years later. It is a good move to pull all that from shelves to kind of, they're easing people's fears a little bit here, and they lost money, and it looks like they didn't really care, which, good on you, Johnson & Johnson. A lot of companies would not do that these days. Either way, it was the perfect crime. There wasn't a better time or place. Commercial surveillance technologies were only just rolling out. Local economies were still largely cash-based. Blazing paper trails didn't concern whoever did this. There were no pictures, no credit cards, no witnesses, no evidence, as put in Chicago Reader case profile. Chicago sprawl, still in the serial killer's shadow of John Wayne Gacy, was the ideal, unsuspecting backdrop, providing the in-plain-sight anonymity that had made indiscriminate killings untraceable. That's why it's chilling. Not only is Timer's unsolved 30 years on, it was done randomly. Larger chemical and bioterrorist acts have since bested Chicago 82. A few come to mind. In 1984, Rajneeshi cult members in the Dallas, Oregon spiked salad bars at 10 restaurants, and a grocer with I don't honestly know how to pronounce that. Members hoped mass salmonellosis, 751 cases were reported, would prevent citizens from going to the polls, thus swaying elections. It didn't. In 1995, Shinrikyo cult members released sarin gas throughout Tokyo rail systems. 13 died, 50 were seriously injured, and hundreds temporarily blinded. The post-9/11 anthrax letters, thought to have been sent by Bruce Ivins, a deranged microbiologist who worked on anthrax vaccines for the U.S. Army at Fort Detrick, killed 5 and exposed 17. Ivins was 62 when he committed suicide on July 28, 2008 with an overdose of, ironically, Tylenol. I want to go back a second to the Rajneeshi cult thing, the Rajneesh movement, I guess you could call it. There is a very wonderful video that I hope a lot of my subscribers have seen by Frederick Knudsen talking about the Rajneesh cult, and if you haven't seen it, which it'll go into this a lot, it's a very long video about the Rajneesh thing and the Rajneesh guy himself. I recommend watching it because it's a very good video, and also Frederick makes very good videos down the rabbit hole. I'm sure you've heard of it, but if you haven't, I will link that video in the description. Please watch it, it's interesting, and it'll give you a little bit of insight into that. But Timers has largely drifted out of public consciousness. The FBI, citing forensic advances and new leads, actually reopened the investigation in 2009. It's only now, however, that the story may be resurfacing due to a new suspect, the Unabomber, Ted, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I'm sorry. Last month, writing from prison, the Chicago native filed a letter in the U.S. Court of Appeals' Ninth Circuit. He agreed to provide a DNA sample, but said his effects, then being auctioned, could have exonerated him to Timers' involvement. With Timers, there are hard facts to reference, to talk about and consider. I should say, rather, there were shareable memories in the shockwave immediately following the poisonings, and then, as the years dragged on, even points, from which differing takes could spring. I'll hazard the guess that many still remember what happened, but being unsolved this whole time, we don't have the sort of closure that could frame collective memories. This cuts down any talk of the case, making our collective Alzheimer's over Timers almost unremarkable. We've forgotten, maybe even repressed, what's eluded us. Collective amnesia applies to material that is related to what was talked about and remembered, only this other material was not talked about and was forgotten. As a result, retrieval-induced forgetting has the added benefit of making what was talked about more memorable, since competing material has become inhibited. Our attention moved on to Oregon and Tokyo and elsewhere, to sometimes bigger, badder, solved, more memorable events. And being such a high-risk calculation, by which I mean the staggering amounts of time and money we need to spend, or the companies must shell out, and gathering the intel to thwart random acts of violence, Timers, like any apparently randomized job, is so horrendous and that it was damn near impossible to anticipate. This only hastened our forgetting it after the fact, and increases the struggle of ever understanding just how to think of the murders. Studying what we still have no real method of measuring is depressingly difficult. So could the absence of the killings from our national psyche also be a matter of classification, or what can and can't be pegged chemical or bioterrorism? The CRS report refers to CB terrorism as individuals or groups motivated by ideology, but not necessarily accompanied by a stated political or social agenda, using chemical and biological agents. A 1999 empirical analysis by Jonathan Tucker, a noted CB terrorism expert now at the American Federation of American Scientists, differentiates terrorists from criminal events. To be classified as a terrorist event, an incident must involve an organization or person that conspires to use violence instrumentally to advance a political, ideological, or religious goal. Criminal incidents, in contrast, involve extortion, murder, or some other non-political objective. So, for the most part, that's the end of that article. The author goes into a little bit about where he or she grew up and some personal anecdotes, but I want to take a moment to compare what is happening with the ice cream thing and the Tylenol murders. They are, while remarkably different, very similar in a way. With the ice cream thing, you have a girl who wanted to start a craze by going into grocery stores or Walmarts or markets or just superstores in general, it doesn't matter, and have an online presence of people licking ice cream or just kind of fucking with it in general. And with the Tylenol murders, you had a person fuck with Tylenol, something that people use on a regular basis, and they unknowingly started a craze, I guess if you could call it, of psychopaths, where they were copying what this person, this unknown suspect, was doing. And you can kind of compare these two. What's also very weird about these two cases is that neither have a real motive. I mean, what was the point of this girl going into the Walmart and licking the ice cream? She didn't say what her point was. She never said that in her original Instagram post. Instead, she just said that she wanted to start something, which is very odd. I feel like if you're going to do this, which, like I said earlier, you shouldn't, you have something that you want to gain from this. And moreover, while it's disgusting, and while it's a felony, I feel like I said earlier, what's so dangerous about this is that she was, as she said, sick when she did this. So if she did it to more than one, or if multiple people were sick when they did this, and they did it to more than one, they have that potential of starting a mass outbreak of whatever they're infected with at the moment. Which, I mean, realistically, I guess you could call that an act of terrorism, because you're putting potentially thousands of people at risk. And I could be very wrong when I say that, but I don't think I am. If I am wrong, tell me what you think. But it's just, I don't know, you could, in theory, classify this as an act of terrorism. And while I don't want to say that it is, because it's just a girl licking ice cream and other people on social media licking ice cream, and that seems silly to say, I can't help myself but say that it is. Like I said, if I'm wrong, tell me. But the reason why Bluebell is pushing for this so hard, and this is the overarching point of the whole video, and some people think that this is just, it's stupid that she's being charged with a felony. It's not stupid. I just want to clarify that it's not stupid. The reason Bluebell is pushing so hard for this is because of the Tylenol murders. This is indirectly linked to the Tylenol murders of the early 80s, whether you want to admit that or not. I don't know what else to say. Overall, what have we learned here? Do not, for the love of God, please do not go into a grocery store, take ice cream off the shelf, and lick the ice cream. Don't fuck with food. Don't fuck with things that people ingest. Don't fuck with things in stores, because you have the potential of putting people at risk. You're also really just kind of fucking with the worker, because they're gonna have to clean it up. They have to deal with it. There's the potential that they're getting their pay docked because they're not observant enough. Just don't. If you don't take anything away from this video, other than this, don't fuck with stuff in stores. Please, for the love of God, please don't. I feel like I shouldn't have to say this. I feel like nobody should have to say this. Don't fuck with things in stores. Period. But with all that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.